All right, high rollers, UFC 218 is in the books, and what a night of incredible fights and outcomes. A couple of vicious knockouts and two legitimate fight of the year contenders. One of those, Joe Rogan calling the best fight he's ever seen. Detroit City rocks, and on Saturday night, the Motor City played host to a great night of MMA. Here to break it down for us is our MMA analyst, Michael Marr, at Michael Marbled on Twitter. Michael, welcome back to the show, man. Thanks for being our high roller today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me again.
Not sure where to start on this one. The main card was great. The prelims were great. I mean, this card is in A-plus territory, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, we had an amazing card last year with Max Holloway getting the title at first in Toronto. And, I mean, when he's been on since, it's been great. But this one was a contribution from so many different fighters. It's not just at the top.
Yeah, it really was stacked, and we'll start right at the top with Holloway versus Aldo 2. I mean, this was pretty much a carbon copy of the first fight, wasn't it? Max Holloway slow at the start, Aldo landed some good shots, but Holloway's got a chin, and he just kept coming forward.
I think this performance from Max Holloway was even more impressive, to be honest. Right out of the gate, he's just taking away every little bit. You know, we saw some good highlights from Aldo as well, and everyone seemed happy to see low kicks all of a sudden, whether it was from the aforementioned injury or not. It was definitely impressive on his side too, but not nearly enough to get the job done.
I mean, what makes Holloway so good? He's just got that tall physique, he's thin, he's strong, and he's got a gas tank. He can go forever.
Yeah, I think he's just, his entire stand-up game is fantastic. He's able to stand in there just a hair's breadth out of danger most of the time. You know, most of the damage that he's taking is minimized somehow by just trying to cover up or move away from the shots, and just the volume and pressure he's putting on people just melts them.
Yeah, I mean, he just goes and goes and goes. And, I mean, you got to give it to Jose Aldo. Even though he's only 31, he's been around forever. And it just seems like he hasn't quite got the stamina to last with that pace. I mean, the pace was just so quick.
Yeah, I mean, Aldo's always seemed like a fairly explosive athlete. And, at times he's struggled to maintain his gas tank or to, recover after his explosions. But Holloway definitely seems like a marathon runner in comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it wasn't like Aldo wilted. I mean, he was still swinging for the fences. It's just that it was too much from Holloway, just too good. After the fight, Max Holloway was very respectful. Quote, I think Brazil should be building statues of that guy. He's a legend. He's a GOAT. I mean, he said nothing but nice things about Jose Aldo afterward.
Yeah, couldn't say enough good things about how Holloway conducted himself, on the way in and afterwards, for sure.
And they're talking about, well, who's next? Who would you like to fight? He goes, hey, they got to come to me. What do you like next for Max Holloway? I mean, is there a potential fight with Conor down the road? I mean, they fought before. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I would love to see that fight down the line, but right now, the only fight that I'm concerned about is Frankie.
So you think Frankie's going to get the shot?
I mean, I certainly hope so. We've seen Holloway go through so much of the top 10 on his way up that a lot of his defenses are likely to be rematches against those contenders. A lot of them have already fought Aldo as well. But Frankie and Holloway still haven't crossed paths yet. And, the question of what can he do against somebody that's got top-level wrestling, that's a fantastic one, but I need to see it.
I'm one of these guys that always underestimates Frankie Edgar. Every time he comes up to an opponent, I think, oh my God, I worry for Frankie Edgar. And most times he surprises me, but I would be worried for Frankie Edgar in a fight against Max Holloway.
Yeah, I could definitely see how it could be bad news for both guys, and I would definitely favor Max going into the fight, but I can't think of another one offhand that I think is a close enough matchup and, enough of a curiosity.
We talked about Max Holloway's skill set. There's a title defense in the books now. Do you think he's got the talent and the heart? I know he's got the heart, but do you think he's got the talent and the ability to, pour off 5 or 6 title defenses in a row?
I mean, I think that's just too long of a window for me to speculate on. Right now, I'm extremely impressed with what his performances have been coming out as. I certainly think that he could get through a handful of title defenses, but I mean, you never know. A year from now, the landscape could change so much.
All right, well, speaking of a changing landscape, there's certainly one happening right now in the heavyweight division. The co-main event featuring Francis the Predator Ngannou against Alistair Overeem, two gigantic fellows. And when you see Ngannou come in that octagon, I mean, you got to have guts just to stand across from him. But man, did he put on a show. And I was with friends and they said, "Who do you got in this one?" I said, "First one to land." And in this case, it was Ngannou big time. I mean, that was ridiculous.
I think ridiculous is just an understatement. I remember watching it and thinking to myself, is all like, yeah, but if Ngannou just touches him, and he doesn't touch him, he lands like the most absurd, looping uppercut that I've ever seen. Just completely straightens Overeem out and instantly out. Oh my goodness. You know what's going to happen, if someone just breaks it down, and then just to see it illustrated the way it did was just stunning.
I mean, he had all the hype going in, and I was wondering, is this overhype, overkill with this Francis Ngannou guy? And then you see it there firsthand, and you're like, wow, this guy is scary. He's amazing, and considering where he's been in his life, and he's not long for this sport, so he's only going to improve, and that's frightening.
Beyond frightening. I was saying he's most likely, it seems like he's probably close to his physical prime, but because he's so inexperienced in mixed martial arts, like the gains that he's making from fight to fight are insane.
Yeah, he really is making huge strides, so much so that he's going to fight for the title now against Stipe Miocic, who packs one hell of a punch in that right hand. I mean, this one is going to be classic. I will be on the edge of my seat. I don't see it getting out of round one, either way.
Yeah, I would imagine that both guys are just going to go after each other right out of the gate to try and get rid of the other one. I hope we get that one sooner than later. I think it's a really interesting matchup also because I believe the maximum title defenses is 2 in that division. So even Stipe doing this one, that's a record on its own.
Yeah, now we saw both these guys, Stipe and Francis Ngannou, fight Overeem, both knocking him out. Of course, Ngannou's was just a little more spectacular. But can you take away anything from the performances? Does it give you any insight as to that matchup? Would you favor Stipe or would you favor Ngannou at this point?
I would. I don't know. I would almost reserve judgment on that one. Like, I would definitely give it the credit that, if Ngannou can connect, obviously he's going to put out anybody. We've seen Stipe come up with good game plans before. We've also seen him, been hittable. So I wouldn't argue with the betting line coming out maybe favoring Ngannou because he's getting a lot of push, he's getting a lot of attention, and he certainly had one hell of a performance.
Yeah, and here's a quote from him after in the post-fight press conference. Quote, "It is one punch, not just to Overeem, not just to Stipe Miocic. I will do that to everyone. I am on my way to completing my dream. I always dreamed of being a world champion." Well, I'll tell you what, if he lands that one punch again, he will be world champion. And this is quite a story, this guy. Out of nowhere and the life he's led to be world champion in such a short time. I think Dana White even said it. This guy could be a worldwide superstar.
Oh, absolutely. He's got a great look. Seems like he's fairly humble coming in. Great story, although we haven't really gotten to hear all of it. I imagine we'll hear some more, in the build-up for Stipe and moving forward from that. But I remember, without trying to make light of what he was talking about, because there's some important issues that I can barely relate to myself that he was talking to in regards to the slavery in Libya. But I remember thinking to myself, well, he's holding Joe Rogan's hand and the microphone in his hand with his 2 giant paws. It's all like that. No one's going to stop that guy from talking.
Yeah, no way. He's got the mic, man. That was an incredible performance, just a one-shot deal. And you're right, Overeem just sort of lifted Matrix style off the canvas and out instantly. Okay, Henry Cejudo, Sergio Pettis. Sergio Pettis was game, but just outmatched by Henry Cejudo. I mean, the crowd, after the night of fights that they had, the crowd was a little disappointed because Henry, of course, likes to wrestle, and it was, on the mat the whole fight. It was still a masterclass performance by him, though.
Oh, absolutely. This entire card was amazing, but that fight was one of the more interesting ones in terms of like the implications for the rest of its division. And I mean, I don't want to say that Pettis' wrestling defense was bad because we're talking about the best guy in the division and one of the better guys in the sport in Cejudo. But I don't remember having seen at one point when Pettis was on his back, but Cejudo is still standing. At one point, he like drops and shoots in to guard. It was pretty interesting.
Henry Cejudo, just a world-class wrestler, and just showed his dominance. Pettis, a good punching power, had a couple of moments in the fight, but Henry Cejudo advances. He says, hey, if DJ doesn't want TJ, I'll take TJ. He wants either one of those guys. What do you think's next for him?
I don't know if he's necessarily going to get a title shot next with the way things have been going and how they've been talking about trying to do super fights and whatnot. I think that Cejudo easily could be in the mix for next, but if not, then, give him something a little bit more official for a top contender match.
Maybe a Benavidez.
I mean, yeah, we saw Benavidez recently, and I'm totally down to see that fight again. If, as I recall, it seemed a little bit muddled in terms of, I believe there was a point deduction, and the decision might have been different had that not been the case, but I'd have to go back and check on it.
Yeah, there was a little controversy in that first fight. So that may be the matchup next for Henry Cejudo. All eyes, of course, on Demetrius Johnson facing off possibly against TJ Dillashaw. Okay, there was a lot of hype for this fight. Eddie Alvarez suggesting that it was fight for the most violent man in the UFC. Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje. And boy, did these two deliver. I mean, this was a war, back and forth, big shots on both sides, and by the end of it, they were both a mess.
Oh my goodness, I remember being apprehensive about how much excitement there was for this fight going into it. I was like, what if it's not as exciting as it's supposed to be? And then, of course, it just like blows every expectation out of the water.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy. Gaethje packs a punch. He was landing some good shots. Alvarez, the one side of his face was all puffed up. I mean, it looked terrible. And then, of course, Alvarez comes back with those massive body blows, just landing flush. I was hoping this one went the distance, and I'm wondering your thoughts on who would have got that decision. What do you think about that if it lasts 2 more minutes? Who wins that fight?
I think Alvarez still captures the score there, the vast majority of the time. I could see there being a little bit of a fluctuation, one round to the next, but for the most part, I thought Alvarez was decisively coming out of the engagements as the better off party. He was absolutely taking some damage. Gaethje was having successes. I just thought overall Alvarez's experience and expanded skill set was enough to outscore the whole way through.
Yeah, well, props to both of them, and they're giving each other props, very respectful on Twitter, both saying what a fight, both guys are winners. I mean, Gaethje, I think he may have been exposed a little bit. We saw him fatigue in the Michael Johnson fight, storm back to win it, proving that Alvarez is just on a different level than Michael Johnson because he got fatigued, didn't he? And that's what cost him. That's why that knee landed, I think. I mean, he was just too tired.
Oh, well, I mean, perhaps it definitely, even Eddie was saying that because it was a 3-round fight by schedule instead of the regular 5-round fights that most of the time is what Eddie's been in lately, would not have been able to go forward with the accumulation of damage on his leg. He would have wanted to finish it in the third before getting to the championship rounds. I mean, the idea of Eddie Alvarez body shots tires me out. I can't imagine eating a whole bunch of them in being in a ridiculously chaotic fight would be certainly exhausting.
Well, you talk about throwing haymakers. I mean, that whole fight was the definition of a haymaker. And you mentioned the leg kicks. I almost forgot about those. I mean, those were devastating. You talk about the heart of Alvarez, even to continue, because his leg absolutely looked like it was, crumbled.
Yeah, it definitely was showing an accumulation of damage. I thought that Eddie did a pretty good job overall, not necessarily showing a whole lot of that damage.
On any other card, this might have been a co-main event, or at least higher up. Teesha Torres versus Michelle Waterson. This was, top contenders going at each other. I thought it was a pretty good fight. That Teesha Torres, she's tough.
I think this is one of the better performances we've seen from Teesha Torres for sure. She was talking about how, this is the first time that she's been able to fight where she's not been, a full-time student as well. So if that's the case, then I think the next fight or two probably will see an even better version of Teesha.
Yeah, there were some good women's fights on the card, and lately in the UFC, the women's fights are getting better, aren't they? I mean, the quality is there. Not too long ago, it was hit and miss. I guess it's that way with the guys too, but it seems these days the women's fights are coming on strong.
Yeah, the progression of the state of women's mixed martial arts has definitely come a long way. Now I think you still see varying degrees. Like I mean I don't train, so I don't want to be particularly critical of anyone's performances. But at times there's some clear evidence of inexperience. That the commentary was making out. I watched the Felice Herrig and Courtney Casey fight on the prelims. That was entertaining, but it seemed a little bit odd in terms of their decision making at times. And I watched the Amanda Cooper and Angela Magana fight in the earlier prelims, and in a spot like that, maybe I thought it was a better example of a disparity in the skill from one competitor to the other, because Amanda Cooper kind of smushed Magana.
Yeah, she was great. She really put on a performance, and you're right, that Herring fight, they basically occupied one spot in the octagon, and they were just trading punches back and forth all night. But I do think that the women's division is really coming on, and you're starting to see some top quality back and forth fights, and it's great to see. All right, let's go to the prelims now, and I guess we got to start with Yancy Medeiros and Cowboy Oliveira. Joe Rogan saying that this was one of the best fights he's ever seen, and he's seen a lot of them. I was on the edge of my seat. It looked like Cowboy was going to win, then it looked like Yancy was going to win, then it looked like Cowboy, and then Yancy finally pulls it off. Has this guy got some kind of heart or what? How did he survive the early going?
Oh my goodness, I can't imagine. The first round was just insanity. I mean, no one's expecting that necessarily the same kind of turnout as Alvarez and Gaethje, but oh my goodness, they were just putting it to each other right out of the gate. Like you were saying, I thought Cowboy had a pretty noticeable edge in terms of what he was landing with in the first, but through the second, I thought Yancy was picking it up and definitely closed the show in the third.
Another one of those cases where Cowboy was just putting it all on the line, and sometimes you punch yourself out. He was so tired, but he was still getting off those good straight kicks and keeping Yancy at bay. But man, the shots Yancy took and to come back and finish with a knockout, it really shows true character and true heart. That guy's got it.
He's clearly done a whole lot of training as well. There's no way he's going to be able to sustain all that damage if he's not in incredible shape.
Well, he's got to keep up with Max Holloway. Those guys are good buddies. What do you think about this idea that Holloway was putting out there that, hey, we've got all these Hawaiian fighters. Why don't we do Hawaii versus the world? I mean, I got to think that some fighters would love to go to Hawaii and train there for a little while.
I mean, they might not like it when they get the bill.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, from what I understand, that's been the big hang up with doing a Hawaiian UFC event. But I mean, he's getting undeniable at this point. He's one of the best talents we've ever seen in the division. The division's as hot as it's ever been. If there's enough other fighters to build the card around, do it.
I think last time that they went back home after both fighting on the same card and both winning, they were welcomed to a hero's welcome. So imagine what will happen this time when they go back there after the first title defense and that amazing performance by Yancy Medeiros just to survive and then to finish and close. It was amazing. One other fight I want to ask you about, I thought it was pretty interesting and gutsy on Paul Felder's part to stay on the ground with Charles Oliveira. Felder, man, just no fear of any submissions, got out of them, and then laid the smackdown with those elbows. That was quite a fight, man. That was a good one.
Yeah, I remember looking forward to that one as well. Looking back on it, my initial thought is it reminds me of Alan Belcher and Paul Harris a couple of years ago, whereas everyone's terrified about the skill set of the one fighter when it's on the ground, and the other guy basically just doesn't seem to give it a whole lot of concern, stay more in harm's way than a lot of other people are, and just light somebody up eventually.
Wow, I mean, Paul Felder looks better each time he gets out there, so I think he's got a bright future. Tough to stand out. I mean, any other night he would have been the standout, but tough to stand out on that card. Any other thoughts on what's next? I mean, the next card, I feel sorry for these guys because it's going to be hard to match that one.
Oh yeah, no, this card definitely would make me a little apprehensive at first about what's coming on that corner because it was so stacked. But I mean, everything looks good from now on. I'm really looking forward to the next pay per view. I'm really looking forward to Cub Swanson, Brian Ortega next weekend, and then there's the RDA and Lawler fight in Winnipeg the weekend after that. That card might be a little bit thinner, but I mean it's still got RDA and Lawler. So
Yeah, and of course, Holly Holm and Cyborg. I can't wait for that one either. Listen, man, I appreciate your time. I hope you can recover after those fights because that was quite exciting. Michael Marr, at Michael Marbled on Twitter. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
no problem. Thank you once again.